Hello, my friends, and welcome to the channel. Now, unfortunately, Joe Biden and the US government are definitely scared of BYD. They, in fact, even made a law to try to stop BYD from selling electric buses in the United States. Now, of course, if BYD can successfully sell electric buses in the United States, which they've already have been doing, they have a factory in the United States that builds electric buses, then what does that mean for them building electric cars in the United States? Well, honestly, what this means is you, the consumer, miss out because BYD make electric cars, full electric cars that cost 10,000 US dollars in China, and they're good. I know you probably think I'm crazy. They're actually good. Look at my other videos. Look at them. Look at the battery packs they have. BYD are the most vertically integrated manufacturer on the planet, followed closely by Tesla. Yep. Don't worry, guys. I'm a big Tesla fan too. I'm highly invested in Tesla, more so than any other company. But facts are facts. BYD are extremely vertically integrated. They make their own batteries. They make basically everything in the car. That enables them to manufacture vehicles at a much lower price than anyone else on the planet. That is EVs, of course. Now, this would benefit not only BYD selling EVs in the United States, but also consumers. Imagine how much this would benefit you in your city. Imagine the reduction of pollution. Imagine you being able to walk into a dealer or just go online and buy an electric vehicle, a small SUV or a hatchback for 10,000 US dollars. Imagine being able to do that. That is crazy, right? Unfortunately, the American government is scared of EVs, so they created a new law in 2019 which prevents BYD from being a real player in the market. Now, California electric bus factory just north of Los Angeles looks like a vision of President Joe Biden's battery-powered, American-manufactured, climate-friendly future. Some 500 unionized workers assemble battery packs, weld frames and install seats, steering wheels and fare boxes, making zero-emissions public transportation on a factory floor at BYD North America that is the size of 9 American football fields. Now, converting transit buses to battery or fuel cell power is considered one of the fastest ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the transportation sector, which at 29% counts for the largest share of US emissions. I'm sure you've had a diesel-powered bus drive past you, throwing up black smoke clouds in the air, and you choke on the fumes. If you haven't, you're not a human being living in the Western world. In fact, you're not a human being living in the world. You're hiding. I don't know what you're doing. You're a hermit. Because this has happened to me so many times I've lost count. And honestly, it's disgusting. Why don't we eliminate this? Well, the great thing is, that's happening right now. BYD and other bus manufacturers are building out EV buses all over the world. But BYD, a unit of Tesla-based BYD Co. Limited, is ineligible for billions of dollars expected to flow out of Washington in coming months to electrify bus fleets due to a 2019 law written with the company in mind. Yep, they wrote this law to prevent BYD from having a significant market share in the United States because they were scared. BYD North American spokesperson Frank Girardo said BYD is going to fight the decision because it does not receive state funding through its Chinese parent company. Locking us out of the lucrative transit market is a bad thing for the American consumer, taxpayer, and worker, Girardo said. Now, guys, remember, I've made lots of videos about BYD. I even made a video which it seemed as though a lot of people liked about who owns BYD. The Chinese government does not own BYD. Okay, there's some haters that watch this channel that are going to try and say, the Chinese government owns everything. They don't. Sorry, guys, they do not own everything. In fact, Berkshire Hathaway, an American company, of course, run by the legendary Warren Buffett, owns 7.5% of Berkshire Hathaway. Himalayan Capital, LLC, another American company, owns 2%. A number of American global fund companies owned a huge percentage of BYD, a huge percentage, and a number of private owners who include the CEO and the COO and the founding partners own a very large percentage of BYD. The Chinese government owns almost nothing. Very, very, very tiny percentage. Now, taking out one of the two main players in the electric bus sector, with other rivals expected to ramp up production, means Biden will be hard-pressed to quickly electrify the nation's bus fleet, endangering a key piece of the president's climate agenda, transportation experts are saying right now. It's very difficult with the current manufacturing infrastructure in this country and with BYD out of the process to imagine getting this large fleet changeover anytime soon, said Jeff Davis, a senior fellow with the Eno Center for Transportation, which tracks federal transit funding and policy. The ban also threatens one of the few examples of unionized labor in the green economy, a pillar of Biden's economic agenda, and marks the latest test in the strained relationship between the US government and companies with ties to China. Now, guys, personally, I don't believe in unionization. In fact, I hate unionization. I believe it usually destroys companies rather than actually improves them. That's my personal take. Of course, there's many nuances within that argument, but that's how I feel about it. However, the irony here is the American car company Tesla is not unionized, which I understand. However, BYD is actually unionized in the United States. So you can see how they're very much an American company. Now, a White House official recently expressed confidence the country can ramp up production, saying a combination of robust federal funding for zero-emissions buses paired with support for vehicle and battery manufacturers would build sufficient domestic capacity to support accelerated transition to EV buses. Now, I don't agree with this because, honestly, there's not a lot of margin involved in the bus sector. Companies like Ford and GM are not really set up to build buses. They're set up to build cars. And they're the companies who need battery supply for their cars. In fact, every car manufacturer in America needs battery supply desperately, and the situation will only become more dire once Tesla starts to eat more and more of their meal. And they'll be screaming out for more and more battery supply. So how much battery supply do you think bus manufacturers or other car manufacturers are going to have put aside to put into buses? Well, it's more difficult than you think, and it's more scarce than you think. Now, Biden and a group of bipartisan lawmakers have agreed to spend an unprecedented $7.5 billion to replace 50,000 diesel buses, or roughly 70% of the US transit fleet, with electric buses over the next 8 years, as the administration aims to cut US emissions in half by 2030. Now, BYD North America competes in the US electric bus market with California-based Proterra Inc. They have sold about 1,000 electric buses in the United States to date, and Proterra plans to build a domestic cell manufacturing facility over the next few years. Now, other bus makers are expected to help fill the gap over time, including US-based Gillig, Canadian NFI Group Inc.'s New Flyer unit, and Canada-based Novabus, a Volvo subsidiary, according to Dan Rodberg, Executive Director of the Center of Transportation and Environment. But they all lag behind BYD in current e-bus production capacity. BYD already manufactures batteries and buses and everything that goes into them. They can basically build the entire bus from scratch. From scratch. No one else can do that. So the Biden administration is massively slowing down the process because they're afraid of BYD. Now, Gillig, NFI, and Novabus are long-standing diesel bus makers that only very recently started selling hybrid, electric, and hydrogen versions of their buses, and don't have a whole lot of capacity to build out more right. Other companies, including Canada's Line Electric Co. and Green Power Motor, US REV Group Inc.'s ENC, and UK's Arrival, are also just beginning to ramp up their transit business. Now remember, by blocking out BYD, do you block out other Chinese companies from the country? Well, maybe you do. Chinese companies have production capacity for a host of other environment-friendly essential items, such as microchips, solar panels, and batteries that the United States currently lacks. The world's biggest battery manufacturer, CATL, is in China. The fourth biggest is also in China, which happens to be BYD. Remember, BYD also builds many different utility vehicles and truck vehicles and dumpsters and all kinds of different machinery that are battery powered, and those are what we need too. Now, as lawmakers seek Build America provisions in multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure spending bills working through Congress, the issue of Chinese ownership could come up often. BYD's parent is traded in Hong Kong and Shenzhen. The company says 60% of its stock is owned by US investors. Now, Warren Buffett actually has, I was wrong in what I said before, 7.5. He has 8.2% ownership in his last annual letter. But after a 2019 congressional report detailed how BYD has benefited from Chinese state-owned investment funds and state subsidies to build battery cell plants that are part of the company's supply chain, it and Chinese rail company CRRC were targeted in an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. Starting in 2022, federal dollars cannot be used to purchase passenger rail cars or buses from state-owned or state-controlled enterprises or state partially subsidized companies, the amendment says. Now, China has poured more than $10 billion into the electric 12, equating to a subsidy of around $10,000 per electric car, give or take, and higher for electric buses, the report claims. Now, BYD North America denies the report and says that as a separate business unit, it does not receive direct Chinese subsidies, which are instead provided to companies doing business only in China. Now, while Democrats and Republicans agree on little, they have come together on bills targeting China and seeking to limit the country's economic influence. Now, last month, while Democratic Representative Pete DeFazio, the chairman of the House Transportation Committee, took to the House floor to tout the importance of an infrastructure bill and used some of the time to attack BYD without mentioning them by name. We're going to get two Chinese companies, predatory Chinese companies, out of here making electric buses and rail, DeFazio said. So, the United States government hates BYD and hates China and wants to get rid of them. However, a recent report came out showing where vehicles are made in the United States. The funny thing is, the number one most American manufactured car was the Tesla Model 3. In third place was the Tesla Model Y. Guess what? 5 of the top 10 were not American-owned companies. They were Toyota, Honda. Toyota and Honda hold 5 places out of the top 10 most American-made cars in America. So, the interesting thing is, GM, Ford, and Dodge build most of their vehicles outside of America. Outside. So when you buy your GM, your Ford, or your Dodge vehicle, there's a very, very high probability it wasn't even built in America. Guess where BYD is making their buses? In America. Guess who profits from that? Americans. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.